When there is no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth. A chilling and iconic line from George Romero's Dawn of the Dead. On Halloween of 2011, a source mod named No More Room in Hell was released by a small, independent team of developers who would in 2013 re-release the title as its own standalone game. My history with this game began a little later than that, however. In early 2014, it became quite an obsession of mine. I recall spending many nights investing hours into what is still to this day one of my favorite and most played games on Steam. So what inspired this team of developers? And what was it that made No More Room in Hell so special? While the game turned out to be a huge success, No More Room in Hell has a somewhat grim beginning. The original mod's development began in 2004, and the project would be abandoned and revived quite a few times, changing development philosophies and team leaders more than once in its early life. The game is something of a zombie itself, having come back from the dead multiple times. In its early years, the future of the mod was uncertain, to say the least. From what I understand, it wasn't until Matt Kazan took lead of the mod's development as its project manager that it really started on the path to becoming what it is today. However, considering that it was a non-profit project that lacked, well, really any financial incentive at the time, development was still understandably very slow. Some of the developers have mentioned that they were simply fans of the mod in its early stages, or lurkers in its forums who had skills to offer and wanted to contribute to furthering its development. While a lack of financial incentive and large studio investment rendered the mod's development in a state of perpetual slow motion, I think it ultimately contributed to the mod's success. It ensured that anyone who really got the opportunity to work on the project was doing it out of genuine passion and belief that it could eventually become something significant. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is that No More Room in Hell was born as a passion project, and it never stopped being that. All the way through its early development, to being released as a Half-Life 2 mod in 2011, to its ultimate release as a standalone title in 2013. The game was mostly very well received when it was brought to Steam. However, some controversy did emerge surrounding one of the game's features. Apparently, some people found it offensive that the developers decided to depict zombified children in the game, particularly because these zombies can be killed, which was featured in the game's Steam trailer. The developers tend to have interesting perspectives on this idea, simply pointing out in interviews that No More Room in Hell is meant to depict a realistic societal collapse, and interestingly, that players don't actually have to kill the zombie children, or any zombies at all for that matter. What I hear the developers saying here is that perhaps their game was not meant to be only a challenging and realistic zombie survival game, but also one meant to cause players moral tension and question the ethics behind their actions in such a scenario. It's also worth mentioning that in the game's Steam achievements, you can find achievements requiring players to complete maps without killing any zombies. I can't help but think that there is a sort of moral ambiguity behind how the developers expected people to approach the game. Honestly, I don't think that depicting zombified children is all that deep. and maybe I'm reading into all this too much, but I thought it was an interesting point in the game's reception worth mentioning. Another feature which I'm surprised doesn't get talked about more is the ability to actually turn a gun on yourself and, how did Jenner put it, opt out? While this feature isn't something you see used all that much, probably because many of the players I've encountered are not aware that you can do it, it is definitely cool to have that option. In addition to adding another layer of realism to the game, it can actually come in very handy in the case of becoming infected when antibiotic pills or gene therapy aren't available, as an infected player, when dead, will reanimate into a zombie that will chase after your former teammates. So, if you have your team's survival in mind, it may not be the worst option in such a scenario. Controversy and, well, edgy features aside, the game was very well received by critics and the community as a whole, receiving awards such as Mod of the Year in 2011, and continuing to stay in many sources' top 100 lists for years to come. What is it about No More Room in Hell that captures so many people and keeps us all coming back? A lot can certainly be said about the gameplay itself. No More Room in Hell is a game that typically requires a lot of resource management, patience, and even a bit of luck in order to succeed. In this way, it showcases a style of gameplay that is entirely unique to the genre at the time of its release, at least as far as I'm aware. It shifted the focus from the run-and-gun style of other popular titles such as Left 4 Dead or COD Zombies to a far more realistic gameplay, requiring more thoughtful approaches. Providing a sense of realism is something that No More Room in Hell does very well, and is accomplished via the implementation of many features and mechanics like proximity voice communication, scarcity of ammo and supplies, and even the use of medication to stave off infection. These features, amongst other things, can make traversing the game world an extremely unforgiving endeavor. And while that may seem frustrating at times, particularly for new players who are just learning the basics, it is important to remember that this is not the typical zombie game. It was in fact designed to distill a sense of desperation into the players, adding an unparalleled sense of immersion. The game's environment is also chock full of Easter eggs and references, including movie posters for the 2007 zombie-inspired film 28 Weeks Later, a survival map based on the farmhouse from George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, and references to various films and shows such as American Psycho and Lost. The list goes on, making obvious the developers' love for horror films and cult classics, both inside and outside the genre. This breathes an undeniable life into the game's atmosphere and is, in my opinion, done in such a way that it doesn't subtract from the player's sense of immersion. I'll be the first to admit, the game isn't easy to pick up. There's a lot to learn and it takes quite some time to become proficient at navigating such an unforgiving environment. But it just makes it that much more satisfying when you do start to get the hang of it and things finally start to go right. Not to mention, the difficulty incentivizes teamwork to an extent that is hard to find in other zombie games. As a bonus, if you're a fan of any classic horror films, chances are there's a reference or Easter egg in this game you'll appreciate. No More Room in Hell was born out of genuine passion for the zombie genre, and a drive to create a more realistic and challenging post-apocalyptic zombie game. As I'm sure is obvious, I think the game nails it in terms of providing this kind of experience, and I would argue that it surpasses other much larger budget zombie titles of its time. It also continues to hold up well in the modern gaming environment, especially considering the developers' continued dedication to the project. Personally, I am very excited to see what the developers have in store for us with the upcoming sequel, No More Room in Hell 2. But that's about all I've got for you today. Thanks for tuning in, and let me know your thoughts on No More Room in Hell and the coming sequel in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I'll catch you guys later.